We have new guests who will be joining us. We still have Waiganjo, who is from the Institute for Social Accountability, Mark Pichachi, who is a political analyst. We'll be joined by a former Nyeri woman rep, Priscilla Nyokabi, shortly. We'll also have on the line lawyer Kamotho Waiganjo, who was among the first people to start implementing this constitution, serving as a commissioner in the constitution, in the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution. He'll be with us shortly. Let's begin with the day's proverb. Now, this one is from Namibia. If you want to give God a good laugh, tell him of your future plans. He looks at you, he just busts out laughing. Imagine God laughing at you.
Got this one.
Surely. Hey, if you want to give God a good laugh, tell him of your future plans. So the conversation continues. And what's that headline in The Nation again today?
So what it was is Reggae is dead. Supreme Court ruling. Ryla said you can't stop it. He was wrong. Supreme Court was laughing.
Okay. The Standard headline, Supreme blow to BBI. In an ironical twist, Uhuru's personal involvement in the push to amend the Constitution is cited by the Supreme Court judges as the reason for burying the Handshake brothers' dream for a new dispensation. Dead in The Nation, buried in the Standard.
Dead
Gone.
and buried.
Yes, gone completely. Is this thing dead, really? Is the BBI dead, Mark?
Schrodinger's cat, it's alive and dead at the same time. The reason why I'm saying this is simple. Because number one, the Supreme Court sanitized, basically, the entire document other than who was the prime mover. So the question you must ask yourself is, if tomorrow somebody else wakes up, and there are very many somebody else's.
We already have two, Junaid Mohammed and Dennis Wawero.
Exactly. And decided to restart that process, okay, albeit it's late in the political calendar, then it could come alive. But number two, we must be very clear that BBI was alive as a political narrative. Now, as a political narrative, you must ask yourself, to whose advantage is it that BBI is silent? When BBI was alive, I will tell you that a certain political class had a field day because they had a bullseye for which to aim their darts. When it fell away, then the narrative had to change, and there was a bit more silence from certain quarters. So the same quarters might be celebrating the death of BBI, but they must be asking themselves, what narrative shall they carry into the elections, especially given the forgetful nature of Kenyan politics. So it is very critical.
Mark, is BBI dead?
I said,
or not?
I answered Schrodinger's cat. It's alive and dead.
It is alive and dead at the same time.
Yes.
Many could also argue that in order for something to come back to life, it has to die at a certain point, right? You put a seed
So
in
it's
the,
dead
you
for
put a
now.
seed in the ground.
Yes.
It must die in order for it to then
And then-
germinate and grow, right?
Wanjiru, is it dead?
I'll agree with Mark on that one, that it's alive and dead, because before elections, I don't believe we'll see any hint or hair from it, simply because the timing will be so inopportune. However, Raila Odinga has said that this process will continue because he's very determined to push forward with some of those, especially on the structure of government, this inclusive government. Now, should Azimio accede to power, we don't know what happens, because once you have power, then the inclination to share it, immediately disappears.
Yes, exactly.
So it could be dead, depending on the outcome
On the
of the
next
2022
steps.
election. But as from now, where Raila Odinga and his political analysts or advisors are sitting, I think they're saying good. At least the Supreme Court went easy. They didn't impose the basic structured doctrine on us. They didn't impose public participation. They removed those hurdles, which is why we are extremely unhappy about that. But so yeah, I agree with you on that.
I'm going to ask lawyer Kamotho Waiganjo that same question, but I'm going to answer it myself in the way that I think BBI is alive. It's just in a coma. It's in the ICU. It's not dead. It has an opportunity to come back to life. Lawyer Kamotho Waiganjo, good morning.
Morning, Eric. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Thank you very much for joining us. It's unfortunate that you
Yes.
not be able to make it into the studio, but it's good enough to have you on the show anyway.
That's okay. Thanks.
Same question. Is BBI dead or not?
Reggae is dead. Long live reggae.
Oh, okay.
Reggae is dead, long
No,
live reggae.
Yes, the truth of the matter is political reggae is dead. There is no question that it's dead and buried as a political mobilization instrument, which it was. You remember Tony saying no reggae, then no election.
Oh.
So that particular refrain is dead. But I think what I think we must be alert to is the implications of the Supreme Court decision is that it can arise from the ashes. Maybe not as reggae, but it can arise in terms of the possibility which had been taken away by the basic structure, the possibility of even far-reaching amendments to the Constitution can occur. But I think we need to remember, and it's something that Chief Justice Martha Koome said in passing, and we need to recognize, and Wanjiru will know this, there have been many attempts. There have been more than 21 attempts to amend the Constitution. And they have failed. Why have they failed? It is because the inbuilt mechanisms in the Constitution actually stop people from facilitating nefarious amendments. And I suspect that is also what is going to happen even to reggae, that anything that was being attempted that is not good for Kenyans will die a natural death, either politically because it will not have the support that it needs, or the courts will stop it because even if it's not on the basis of the basic structure, but that it requires a referendum and nobody wants to submit this thing to a referendum, all manner of issues. So I don't live worried that because the basic structure has been removed, now we're going to have an overwhelming amendment to the Constitution that's anti-people. But the theory, at least in theory, it opens the possibility of reviving reggae. In practical terms, I think it's not going to be easy. And I'm not sure that we'll have the sort of groundswell for major amendments that we had this time when we have a new government in 2022. I doubt that you'll get that sort of coalition to maintain an amendment to the extent that was being sought. Maybe what we will do is have minimal amendments. For example, maybe increase money to counties. I think the political class will probably get together to expand the executive, maybe in a different form. But many of the amendments will probably die with the political reggae.
Do you think that this presents another opportunity, Kamotho, for then the Constitution as it is to then be implemented? Because many have argued that, a majority of 2010 has not been implemented. And so here we are trying to make amendments to it. And then, so now that part has gone, do you think now there can be refocus then on implementing the several parts of the Constitution that could have gone ahead anyway?
That has always been my position. That look, I myself believe there are certain amendments that were progressive, but I am also very aware that our problem in Kenya is not more law and more constitutions. A lot of the problems we have is because even at a very basic level, we do not implement what we have. If we even we're talking about increasing money to 35% allocations to counties. But even the one we are giving today, that we are allocating today, it works out usually to about 20%. It is not released to the counties. So the solution, it's good to increase it constitutionally and put it to 35%. But even that which we have now, we're not implementing. If you look at the gender issue, for example, it's important that it be anchored in the Constitution. It would be ideal. But listen, even where we could easily do it by way of appointment, if we always complain about elections, how do we feel the gender quota in Parliament? But look at appointment. We do not even meet the threshold where they are competent, capable women. We do not appoint them. So our problem is not really the Constitution. If we want to do 70%, 80% of the Constitution as is today, even issues we talk about inclusion, even when we talk about expanding the executive, there are many things you could do that would tell Kenyans that we actually want political exclusion, which do not require constitutional amendment. And again on this point, and that is where now one wonders about good faith. If you look at the content of the BBI report, it had statutory proposals, it had administrative proposals, and then it had constitutional amendments. What we have spent a lot of time on is BBI constitutional amendments. What happened to the proposals for administrative amendment? Tax breaks for young people, those things. Why haven't we been on the forefront of putting that in the Finance Act, ensuring that we are restructuring help, for example, to ensure that people have a holiday? Those things are available in that constitutional change. So if you want to tell me that you are a believer in reggae, show me that which you can do without the need for a constitutional amendment, you're doing them. If you're not doing them, but you're promising me that once you amend these, now I'll do them, I don't believe you. So I think we must, this allows an opportunity to actually ask the question, why are we, you people who are selling reggae, why are you not implementing the 20 things you could have implemented without the constitution? Why are you holding as a transom, acting like unless there's a constitutional change, we can't implement administrative arrangements? So I think it's a conversation that now Kenyans need to have and refocus away from just saying, let's change the law, let's change the constitution.
Right. Yeah, Kamotho, like you said, and hi, it's good to have you on and to connect after a long time. We miss you on this side of issues. I hope you're doing well. Probably back in the trenches or supporting the work there. Like you said, there have been many attempts to amend the Constitution, and the courts have been the bulwark, really, of the Constitution under a very hostile regime. We now, of course, have a reconstituted Supreme Court. What does this judgment say about the politics of the court, of the Supreme Court, especially when compared with the former?
Okay, let me say this, and I think I actually worried when the Supreme Court decided to hear this matter before the election, because there was a very real risk that depending on the way the court made yesterday's decision, that the court would go into a very delicate process called resolving the presidential petition tainted, And I think it was important for the court to present a decision that the political establishment was generally happy. And if you notice, even the owners of reggae have not lambasted the Supreme Court. Even them, they have been circling it. Also because the judgment was well reasoned. Even when one agrees with it, it was a fairly mature judgment. So also in terms of content, it sort of talked to everybody's critical issues. It gave on the one hand and took away the other. It gave back the president's immunity. It affirmed the public participation, but it took away basic structure. It said the president cannot run a popular initiative. So everybody had something to go home with. That, in terms of the politics of the court going into a presidential petition, was very, very important. Don't forget, Wanjiro, that in 2007, court's refrain was, this court is already compromised. Martha Koome, I think, was determined not to have that allegation. And if that means let the process of amendment of the Constitution come after the election, it's good for the court. So that's the politics of the court, at least in the immediacy. But the other dynamic about the court is that, if you notice, it was a lot more of a collegial court. You sense that even if there were disagreements between the court appeared like it had caucused together, which is good for a Supreme Court, because it's a collegial court, and it's meant, even when it has differences in opinion, to still be working together as an institution. I think the danger for the court is to ensure that even as it gives pragmatic decisions, to keep improving our jurisprudence. And I say this because if you look at the difference in terms of intellectual rigor between the High Court, leave out the Court of Appeal, between the High Court and the Supreme Court, the intellectual rigor at the High Court was much higher. In terms of the reasoning behind even something like basic structure, it was intellectually very sound. So one hoped that even as the Supreme Court is being pragmatic, that it would also have the same level of intellectual rigor as the lead court jurisprudentially. So that, for me, that was one. And my final point on that would be that There are also some areas that the court, was, it was unfortunate that they didn't process some of the implications of their decision. This decision about the popular initiative and the president makes sense when one considers that the presidency in Africa is a very, very strong institution. And the danger of constitutional reform, bad constitutional change has always been about the executive. So you need to shield the process from the president. But I think we need to ask ourselves how realistic that is, especially if we are a presidential system where the president doesn't have control or even involvement in parliament. The final issue I wish they had spent time on is the last issue which they all escaped, where they said, this issue is remote, on whether you can have one question. I mean, you are the Supreme Court. This is not the issue, because you see, when we have a referendum next time, we shouldn't have to come back to you. I mean, the issue is before you. Resolve it. And I found that some sort of, I don't want to use the word laziness because they are my seniors. But the point is that they could have done a better job in putting that baby to sleep. I was very happy that even people like Justice Jokidongo refused to take that argument when it came to the question of the constituencies, the Schedule 2. Even though it was remote, they dealt with it. So I wish they had dealt with every issue, because you don't want to keep going back to court when these controversies arise.
So our other guest joins us in the studio, and this is Priscilla Nyokabi, a former commissioner with the Gender Commission, former Nyeri woman rep, and former civil society activist as well.
Incoming senator.
Incoming senator.
Forget the former.
Of where? Of Nyeri. Same Nyeri.
Nyeri, yes.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Karibu sana Senator mtarajiwa. Utatuachia kakitu.
Hiyo ni Harambee. That's Harambee speak.
Ndio tukupigie debe.
Mtarajiwa just means dig into your pocket.
You were following this process, the BBI process. And even when the secretariat was formed and all, you were also there. And you publicly advocated for the BBI. Now, the question that we are asking, after yesterday's judgment in the Supreme Court, is BBI dead or not?
No, it's postponed. It's not dead. It got a lifeline yesterday with the basic structure, which actually means that 90% of the content survives. So for those of us who supported the BBI, we're very, very happy about that. The part about the money, the allocation, 35%, that survives. The expanded presidency, that survives. The 2/3 gender rule, which I was very keen on myself, survives. So only the 70 constituencies schedule was killed by the judgment. So 90% of the content is good. It just means that if you follow the process, and I like that they found public participation was done. So we don't have a problem of public participation. We just need to pick up the document, I think the other side of the election, tighten what they think was wrong, especially the 70 constituencies and the role of the IEBC, and get back on track. So I'm with Baba. Reggae has been postponed.
And in fact, on that, and hi Priscilla, good to see you, and all the best.
And good, former civil society, yes.
Present, yes. On the question of public participation, because of course we work with public participation, and as I was sharing earlier, we struggle a lot. There are questions about threshold and all, but what has happened in this context is that the structures of public participation were ravaged. Starting with the Moi regime, infiltration of the Maendeleo ya Wanawakes, infiltration of trade unions and all of that. Running into the Kibaki regime, which was a lot more open, but these structures had already been ravaged. And we've been struggling to strengthen citizen voice to the threshold of Article 1. Sure. And under this constitution. And so the High Court ruling was very strong on public participation, and the process of changing the constitution was very well outlined. Now, losing that is a big blow, because the BBI was a managed participation process. It wasn't an inclusive public participation process. And even if we weren't political actors, we are seeing this repeated by county governments, national government. If you look at government records, there is public participation, but the public are not properly engaged because the process is rigged. So
So it's
That-
choreographed public participation.
Exactly.
And it has
The
been
people
rubber
are-
stamped by the Supreme Court.
Exactly. People are being participated. So this is a big blow.
Being participated.
That is it.
No,
This
let me-
is a big blow.
let me
Would
ask-
you not agree?
Let
No,
me,
can I say something just
Yes.
before, and then just on that? Yeah, I'm with you on effective public participation. That this public participation we're looking for has got to be effective. It is just that what I like with the judgment yesterday is they found that a fair amount of it had been done. Maybe not sufficient, because if you look at that particular line of judgment, it is not unanimous. Some of the Supreme Court judges actually felt that it should have been more than that. And I like that those of us who were then in BBI can go back and look at what more public participation should be done. In fact, part of the reason I want to be a senator myself is questions like those, because we don't have a legal framework, you don't have a law. Remember, we are from access to information. You don't have the documents applied in good time. So there's quite a lot of work
contracts.
that we still need to do around
Contracts of
public
your
participation.
administration. Can I say?
So
Shall
effective
we go
public
there?
participation. But now for yesterday we won, first things
First you
first.
celebrate. First you celebrate.
Mark,
the win for me is critical, because there is two sides to this public participation story. There is the government creating opportunities and ample opportunities at that for the public to participate. It is quite another thing for the public to actually participate, because if you look at all of these things that are gazetted, and let's be proper citizens, okay, and be honest with ourselves, there are opportunities upon opportunities for people to participate in various government programs. This I know because I have been involved in advertising for some of them. And what happens is you'll be shocked at the lack of willingness of stakeholders in a particular industry, in a particular field, in a particular sphere of society to participate. The problem we have in this country is not just a legal one. We also have a situation of the ethos of the Kenyan. And this is predominantly for me, the ideology that participating in the democratic process of this country is voting. It is not. We do not participate in town halls. We do not contribute even to the candidates we support. We do not work with them. We do not hold them accountable even before they get into power. So for me, it's not just a matter of putting laws in the books. We must, from the beginning, change what the Kenyan idea is of political and public participation,
Engagement.
because that is where the problem is. Because it's not that the opportunities lack. I think if you went to those medium-term meetings, for example, and you had enough of teachers, women, men, young people pushing their agendas, someone will have to listen at some point. And so it's a two-way street in my view. And my fear is we could over-legislate and get ourselves into a quandary where the government cannot work because we must ask Kenyans who don't want to speak about everything.
that
On
every
one hand,
Kenyan must speak.
Yes.
Let's hear what Kamotho would say before we take a break, and also we release him. Kamotho, the issue here is on the threshold of public participation. Do you think, or do you agree with Wanjiru when she says that here the threshold seems to have been lowered in terms of the level of public participation?
Yes and no. I think there was sufficient diversity of opinion on the issue to say that there are people who felt that a lot more could have been done. But also don't forget that the court was addressing the question of the public participation up to the point where the process reached. They were not saying public participation for the entire constitutional reform process, but they were saying up to the point where the process reached, there was sufficient public participation in that context. But I think I want to say something about the whole question about public participation. I think one of the things that we forget is that if Kenyans really believe that their participation matters, I guarantee you they'll be involved. I remember when we were in the CIC, because I think at that time people are very hopeful about the constitution and that their word matters. People used to turn up. I mean, people used to turn up in their hundreds, and we didn't even need to pay them anything. People turned up and they gave views, but then after some time they realized that this don't matter. When they go for MTF meetings, they realize that the treasury is there to tick. At least that's their perception.
Yeah.
When they go for budget participation meetings in counties, they know there's already a budget. So to expect them to turn up next year and they can see nothing happen, and then we don't even go back to them and tell them why their suggestions were not taken into account.
Yeah.
People become skeptical about public participation. So I can understand why they stay away. But I think the other bigger problem is that if our issue, should our concern be public participation, the formal process of public participation, or increased civic awareness? Isn't that where we should be investing? How is it that we're talking about public participation, but I don't know any single county, as far as I know, that has a budget for civic awareness? We have budget for public participation forums. You know, the national government has budgets for MCE forums. But if we ask about budgets for civic awareness, where we're making people aware about the responsibilities of a citizen, about the reason why they make democratic choices, about what democracy means beyond the vote, that civic awareness we need to invest in. What we invest in is formal processes. But those formal processes, people become skeptical about, and a lot of times people are also not aware. When you call people to do budgets, they are huge documents. They can't even read them. The typical villager has not interacted with formal documentation. So there's a problem. And I think we need a conversation, both even Waiganjo from civil society, to start investing more in civic awareness so that then people see the need for public participation. If people see the need, and if people see that it makes an effect, and we need to push people Waiganjo for government to respond back to people. We recognize that public participation is not about people imposing their decisions, but surely we owe them to explain to them why we were not able to take. So that's a conversation that we need to have now about the quality, the qualitative, not the quantitative, the qualitative side of public participation.
Completely agreed, Kamotho. And just a question does this now set a standard, a jurisprudence for the standard of public participation? Because the point that we raised is the BBI process, as had happened, didn't have the civic education. The questions were framed and imposed. The structure was then unfolded without a proper schedule, because part of public participation is that people need to be made aware, people need to have a proper timetable, people need to have a reasonable ability to influence the outcome of the process. Now, the BBI process improved as it went along, but for the main part, this wasn't the case. It was a very elite process. So are we saying that we now have that as a standard for public participation? And what recourse is there if that's the case?
I think there's always going to be challenges about quality, the qualitative side of public participation and sufficiency. So I don't think that issue is closed. But I think you also need to understand what the judges were also being careful about. That if you also put in a popular initiative, if you put the threshold very, very high, then it also makes it almost impossible for the Wanjiko who you're saying should be the owner of this process, especially the initial stages. You know, the initial stages where Mwananchi is the one who is involved, not even the IEBC. These initial stages, the initiation processes, if you make the public participation threshold very, very high, then it makes it difficult for the average person on the street then to ever have an opportunity to engage in initiating reform processes. So I think one has to balance that, recognize this is not government. If it's a government, you can raise the threshold very high. But if you're talking about citizen engagement, then you need to be careful. Yes, we still have public participation, but in these initial stages, not make the threshold too high so that it becomes unaccomplishable and therefore the exclusive terrain of people with money. So I think that was the balance the court was trying to say. But that conversation in terms of sufficiency is obviously not over.
Thank you very much. Kamotho Waiganjo, we want to let you go. Thank you for joining us this morning on the call. Kamotho
Have a
is...
good one. Nyokabi, and you have an ask for my vote. You know?
Yes, I need yours plus posters, please.
That's the public participation that she's asking. She's asking for direct engagement.
Yes.
You know, in my place they say you ban the army. You must ban the army. I'm sure Nyokabi understands.
Ban the army, the gum.
Yeah, I'll find you, counsel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kamotho Waiganjo is a constitutional lawyer. He's one of the people who started implementing Constitution of Kenya 2010 as a commissioner in the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution. The conversation continues after we take this quick break with Waiganjo, with Mark Bichachi, and with Senator Mutarajiwa, Priscilla Nyokabi. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room.
And Mark Bichachi, who's a political analyst. We are talking about the political consequences or ramifications of yesterday's judgment at the Supreme Court with regards to the BBI. Priscilla, do you think this will now become an issue ahead of August elections? Before High Court and Court of Appeal, it was shaping up to be the issue of the August elections. Yesterday, if they had not said that the president was wrong to initiate this, and they had not said that Schedule 2 was unconstitutional, it would have been an issue. Is it going to be?
I think it is still an issue, especially in my part of the country, because these one man, one vote, 1 shilling, and we had it there, one wife. To be honest,
Yes.
Gender balance.
it was going badly.
Yes, it was
Men were even
terribly.
said 1 man, 2 shillings. No, 1 man, 2 women, 3 shillings. In between and buyer. So it's a 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. That's a live debate in Mount Kenya, and that will continue to be a live debate because of the resource allocation and the fair representation questions. And now we have somebody to blame for the loss of that. It was going to be 54 billion shillings in Mount Kenya. And you can see the struggle with our counties,
Who
the
are you gonna
struggle with
blame
our
for that?
governors.
It's political.
We're going to blame the person who said the BBI was bad, because the BBI had good things in there. I see the judges were at pains not to go into the content because they know that some of that content is actually good content for the country. So in Mount Kenya, maybe another parts that were going to benefit, the coast was going to get all of the constituencies that they need. Anybody who was in the 70 list, I think should have a claim, because it does mean that now the fair representation has been postponed. We're going into the election in 2022 with discrepancies around population that we have. An MP like Mercy Gakuya here in Kasarani represents 6, 7, 8, 10 times of what other people represent. And when you come on to parliament, it's extremely unfair because you have only 1 vote. You have 1 CDF kitty for a huge population. And that's why, for me, I'm very worried about the turnover. And maybe even in civil society, we should worry about this turnover of leaders. Our parliament, you barely arrive, you barely learn the ropes, and then you're fired. And you will be fired because the expectations
performance.
cannot be met. Even our governors, part of the reasons, it's only in Mount Kenya where we have impeached our governors. When I was in the impeachment of Governor Anne Waiguru, and then she was one of the first women governors, so it was really, we were at pains, because if you impeach the first woman governor, what is that going to mean for people who want to contest for governor in the future, and women who wanted to compete for governor? And let me tell you, the battle in Kirinyaga wasn't even for 1 billion shillings of development money. It was about 700 million. Now, what wanamalizana for 700 million? So this conversation is live, and it must be live, even though the BBI now has been lost. The other good thing about the basic structure, which I personally now like from a legal perspective, is that our constitution is self-contained. You now don't need to go to India. You don't need to go anywhere. If you want any answer in our constitution, you have to find it within there. So it's not to say that we don't have a basic structure. It's to say that the basic structure of our constitution is contained therein. And that was always our position, that there are protected clauses, the term limit for the president, which we now have to protect with our lives, because we think that in future that term limit might be at risk. So we are a self-contained constitution. The 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, 1 wife debate.
So that can become a big issue in Mount Kenya.
Yeah, that's
Right.
Is
Can
the issue of President Uhuru Kenyatta losing thrice going to be a big issue as well, politically, as a campaign issue?
I think what is an issue is what he meant to leave us, which has now not been actualized. I think that's going to be an issue. And also the forces that, I don't know how people like Mother Karua are going to play this out for having opposed the BBI. The good thing is that with politics, I think it's always easy to sort of explain yourself. But I think that it will be sad that the president meant to leave the region in a bit of a secure position. We are latter-day converts to devolution. We would have wanted to get the fruits of devolution just like everybody else. And I think that helps us now to see the candidate for presidential campaigns who supports devolution properly, who in our view is Baba. Now we can properly support Baba
my goodness.
because of devolution.
You see, the
That
thing
is politics. You just change the heart so conveniently, forgetting the fact that, yes, this administration didn't implement the constitution. Nothing stops this administration from giving counties more money. Even the 20%, as we were discussing here, they are not giving to the counties. So and I think maybe the 30% who are talking about undecided voters and the high turnover of political leaders is Kenyans are not impressed. And in fact, I'm being polite. Kenyans are possibly quite dismayed, maybe even disgusted by the conduct of their political leaders. BBI campaigns started in the throes of the COVID pandemic, at a time when businesses had shut down and people were out of jobs and households were going hungry. And these economic pressures persist till today. The top issue is the cost of living, and our political leaders are only interested in grabbing power. Priscilla, I put it to you. The
If I can jump on that
turnover
question.
will
No,
continue because we are unable to recall. We are unable to influence the electoral system because elections have been rigged. So the only weapon, it's true.
Priscilla, let me jump on that
let's-
question
you
and
know.
ask as well, because even as you say this, I mean, it would be quite convincing as you hear it, talking about issues that then need attention, and that the BBI then is touted as something that would be able to fix that. The factors then that were brought about in the BBI would be then the panacea to all of this. But then how do you address the very important issue that comes out when folks are saying this was clearly a thing that was put together to make sure that power remained in the hands of people and that you could then control the knobs of what you would be able to do in the country? How do you do? Because it is an important issue, even if it was raised by one. How does it then affect Kenyans across board? Why couldn't these other things be done without this?
No, I think there's a sense in which, the Constitution is a power document and is a power map. So you can't run away from that. And there's a sense in which power is resources, is how do we get resources? We go to power to control the resources. And some of these, when we did the Constitution of Kenya 2010, some things were not as pressing as they are now. I personally take the view that a top of two people for 47 communities living in this country is not going to be sustainable. We're going to have to reopen that power sharing at some point in time. We cannot continue to have just, even like now with this 2022 election, you can see the difficulties with many of the leaders. Why do you think Alonzo and all the other leaders are struggling? Musalia, and it's because it's a top of two. I don't even know why, and speaking for those of us who are in civil society, why we ever designed a top of two for 47 communities to share. So some of these conversations are not even just now, is the conversations we must get into. Even this conversation on devolution.
Isn't it because 40% of the resources were supposed to be going to the county level? So really,
That's also true.
There's the 47 that are supposed to be empowered.
But
We
let
are
me
supposed to
finish
have
something, because
urban
you're
areas.
jumping onto my time after putting it to me. Now allow me to respond. This question around the cost of living and the functions. If you look at what we did with the devolution, we gave very heavy functions to counties without sufficient resources. And we are a constitutional democracy. I've been in the budget committee now. And I can tell you, when the constitution says 15%, it's very difficult to convince Treasury. It's very difficult to convince Treasury to go beyond that. What I now have seen where we can respect the law is if the law says 35%, Treasury will respect 35%. If the law says 15%, you will be as close to 15% as possible, even where there's an attempt to sort of, because I know like in this regime, they've tried to put the figure way above 15%. But it is much better if we legislate and constitutionalize 35%. So this conversation does not end. It is not just so much that people want to retain power. It is also so much that then so many of us should be in power for us to all get the benefits of the resources, what we were calling shared prosperity. And there's no harm in these conversations. In fact, what happened with our judiciary yesterday is something to be celebrated, that we are getting of age, we are coming of age in our conversations. Even people who opposed the BBI knew that there was value in the one man, one vote, one shilling sort of conversation. The gender debate, for example, the 2000 gender rule, is never going to be done until we amend the same constitution so that we give the formula and the frameworks that we need for it. So they even noted that we have tried to amend this constitution 23 times. It's just that we have not succeeded. We will succeed in amending the constitution.
In the 25th, Mark.
You know, there are things here that we need to disabuse. Number one, there is nothing wrong with having diverse views and wishing to change things. Whether that change is even to say that counties should get 10%. I think any person with an idea in this democratic space needs to be entertained. This thing of painting ideas evil versus not evil, I don't think is a progressive argument. We need to get to the point where we talk about things based on merit. In fact, just personalizing amendments, I think is quite ridiculous as well, because there's been a lot of Uhuru Kenyattaizing of these amendments. And we forget one thing, and we said it before, just before we went on a break, that a sitting president who's exiting and a new president who is likely to sign off on 35% devolution. It is an opportunity, because Uhuru Kenyatta could have signed off on it because there's no skin off his back and we would have gained from devolution. Now, which president coming in is going to say, you know what, I want to control 20% less of the budget? That's not how power works. Secondly, these conversations, and this is why I said BBI is like Schrodinger's cat, dead in one perspective but very much alive in another. The questions that BBI sought to answer are still questions that are very, very, very much alive. One of those questions, even in as much as we said that the handshake being described as a very benevolent act from leaders by the Supreme Court was wrong, I don't think it was, because one of the things that this country continually faces, and even if you look at the way we discuss BBI, it's almost as if we want to come to blows over discussing ideas. We've not gotten to the point where we can differ and agree to disagree. So the journey of the BBI is not just about a constitutional amendment. It is also about Kenyans looking at themselves in the mirror and realizing that there are very serious issues that we need to deal with. Lastly, I want to say this. There's a lot of talk about why don't politicians focus on the issues that really matter to Kenyans. They will only focus on the issues that get them elected. Let's be very clear. Because they are there to get elected, first and foremost. Now, if you start a rally today talking about base lending rates, talking about our import-export quota, how many people are going to show up at that rally? So we need to also do ourselves a favor and up the game and the demand that we have upon our leaders. This idea that the funnier a leader is, the more likely they are to be elected, is part of the reason. If you elect me based on jokes, guess what I'm going to do? Get funnier with your economy.
You say Uhuru, we are making a mistake of Uhuru Kenyatta-izing this BBI conversation. Yes. But Uhuru Kenyatta is this. He led from the front.
No,
he said many times we are in a constitutional moment. He said very many times that I want to leave a legacy of amendments to the Constitution.
And in fact, this ruling shows just how out of step Uhuru Kenyatta has been with the people of Kenya from the get-go on the economy, on the choice of infrastructure projects that have impoverished us, brought us to our knees, put us back into the shackles of the IMF. Our exchange rate is sliding. We are facing an inflation, economic ruin, courtesy of being
economic ruin.
That can't be true. That can't be true. No. Let's not let some things go. Let's not let some things go. We have one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. I'm sure that you know.
Yes.
No, look at the list.
That is financed by. That is financed
by who?
It's financed by the debt that we are unable to pay.
Is the economy growing?
And in fact,
yes, the economy is growing.
We are paying more on. Yes,
this is an 11 trillion economy. Unless unataka sasa, you just want to be unfair on the facts.
Yes,
really. We could talk about poverty. That I agree. But you cannot underscore the fact that the economy is growing.
Let me finish the point. This the jobless growth of this economy is because we've borrowed heavily, put that money in unfortunate projects that have a lot of private political interests, borrowed expensively, and right now are facing a situation where the tax we collect, about 70%, is going to repay these debts. And it's coming at a time, unfortunately, when we also have COVID, we also have the Ukrainian war, these external factors. Yes, we're in an economic crisis created by Uhuru Kenyatta's misplaced priorities. Now, the point I was making is that the BBI project was also misaligned to the needs of the Kenya in terms of timing. It doesn't mean that those issues aren't pertinent. It doesn't mean that we don't need to revisit them. But we do have, in terms of Uhuru-nizing, Uhuru has been out of step. And he has lost badly because of that. But the people who have lost more are Kenyans because of the reason you're saying, this culture that we haven't dealt with. We don't hold our leaders to account.
Okay.
We easily get pulled in by humor, by jokes, by pop star antics, instead of really holding these guys to account.
Okay.
Let me define my point.
Your 30
when I say Uhuru Kenyatta, I don't mean that Uhuru Kenyatta was not the prime mover of this thing. What I mean is this. The merit of his ideas is not based on his person. For example, when you say 35% is bad simply because you don't like the person, you're missing the point. The point here is this. Even people who say the economy is in crisis, which some people people like Devin D have sung that our economy is dying for the last 10 years. I've been waiting for the funeral. It has not happened. Economic collapse, as we say it over and over again, is not a reality. And any country that has developed off a backbone of infrastructure. And infrastructure is painful to build. Let me finish my point. It is painful to build. In the wake of 1945, the United States embarked on an infrastructure development program. China did the
How
same
did they
thing.
finance it?
But through
Get
debt.
the facts.
I gave
Get
you
the whole
30
picture.
seconds.
Get the
Okay,
whole
thank you,
picture.
Mark. Priscilla.
Get the whole picture.
No. I think one of the things that I personally have really loved of leaving civil society and coming on to leadership and to politics is the reality that hits you. It's very easy to be very idealistic in civil society, and I personally love it. I miss it. But when you come to politics and to leadership, there are difficult choices to be made, and those difficult choices have to be made. The handshake was a difficult choice. It had to be made for the good of the country. So it's true that the president has spent a lot of time on infrastructure, and I come from a region where we actually expect him to finish the Mau Mau roads, to finish the Kenomarua road, and even the Isiolo link. So infrastructure is important. What we are now discussing is not so much what didn't work, is how can we move from infrastructure to the next level of growth. And I agree that we need inclusive growth, that we haven't had much inclusive growth. And that's why for the next regime, the answer is to build on to what has been done. But it's not to demonize everything that has been done, because some good has also come out of it. Difficult choices are to be made. And I personally love even the expressway, because the productive society here, which is the industrial, including you guys here, has been caught up in this traffic. We had to open up that traffic so that the inclusive society can work.
Asante.
Yes.
Priscilla Nyokabi wants to be the
now
next.
niombe kura, please. The people of Nyeri, wasinisahau.
Wasimsahau, wakuone kando. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you as well, Mark, for joining us. And Wanjiru, always a pleasure to have you here.